MACFADYEN. Welcome to this week's episode of Succession spoiler reviews here on the Outlaw Nation. We are reviewing season 4, episode 8. America Decides. I don't know if America decided by the end of this episode for sure. We're going to break this thing down. Shannon and I are still suffering a little bit of PTSD from this episode, and we're going to talk about it all and break it down. I am the Outlaw John Rocha. Shannon McClung, how are you doing, brother, man?
I mean, I've watched the episode twice now. The stress level only increases. Like once you have the story laid out in the first episode, I can't believe this is happening. Then watching it the second episode, knowing that the storm is coming, you would think you would be better prepared to batten down the hatches, but you're not.
Yeah, we had so much in this episode. And before we jump in and remind you all to please subscribe to the channel down below and hit that bell button here. Trying to encourage more and more people to subscribe to all the great content we got going on here on the Outlaw Nation. But yeah, this episode, it's the day of election, y'all. It's election day, y'all, for sure here. And we saw that obviously being previewed in the last episode because as you guys know, every episode is one day in this entire season, and it's just incredible to see what happens here. We've got Tom trying to handle stuff with ATN, trying to make sure that his people take care of business. Kendall's on top of him and making sure, hey, we got to get those ratings because the sale and all the pressure's on Tom. And on the other side, you've got you got Kendall, Roman, and Shiv wandering the damn newsroom, trying to affect people and push their weight around. You've got Shiv working with Matsson behind Kendall and Roman's backs. You've got poor Greg having to be demoted back to Gregging for Tom, throwing wasabi and lemon juice into the man's face there, who's essentially the Nate Silver of the episode. So just so much that went on. And at the end of the day, Jared Mencken, pending right now, is the president of the United States in this world of Succession. And it was decided through a bunch of just really unsettling, nefarious moments, petty moments between these kids. And it's so scary, Shannon, to think that an election could come down to something petty. You used to get chicken all the time because of what you did, and I wanted steak. Or something even more petty between Shiv and Roman and the way they were going back and forth, depending there. But all this came back to all their personal points of views and what they wanted mixed in with what they think the country wanted, or not giving a fuck about what the country wanted. So, Shannon, what are your overall thoughts on this episode? What are your feelings when you think about everything that went on here step by step through this process?
I mean, hell hath no fury like a Greg scorned.
Great point.
Shiv threatening to put his internal organs on the outside clearly had the opposite effect. Yeah. I mean, watching the behind the scenes with JESSIE ARMSTRONG talking about how in the past in the US, as they were coming up with, in the writer's room, this idea, is this too unrealistic? And then you look back just in the last little over 20 years in the U.S. elections, how 2016, 2000, I mean, these
hanging chads,
these sort of incredible moments that I imagine you probably wouldn't expect to see more than one in a lifetime. And the fact that we've already gotten 2, and I don't feel like you and I are expiring anytime soon. So who knows what's going to happen? Again, just a spectacular episode of television, and these things that have been building, like this Shiv Matsson alliance. Watching how it has finally reared its head, and literally every Roy child is out for themselves right now, and it's clear that Kendall feels the most betrayed. Despite the fact that Shiv did the same thing to Roman. But he definitely feels the most betrayed. The whole, I'm a good guy. Like seeing that again, that just betrayal bubble to the surface and the fallout that is going to happen. I mean, even Tom confronting Shiv and Shiv throwing back, well, I'm pregnant. Impossible. Like you understand Tom's point of view. Where he's like, is this a new tactic?
Question it.
Yep. You wait until now to say this. There's no way for me not to think that this is this is a ploy.
Yeah.
Just so well done. Very brief moments of Frank and Carl, but when we did get them, when Connor was running for president, like, so funny. We continue to really wish Connor and Willa the best, but Connor is already demonstrating, like, oh no, you are a Roy.
Yeah.
You're not as terrible as them, but that doesn't mean you're not on the terrible scale. Yeah, dude, just a fantastic episode of television. The moment where Kendall steps out of the conference room and makes that call to Nate, and the moment that you see Jeremy Strong turn, I mean, everyone just did a killer job. From our regulars to our guest cast, Adam Godley. Just fantastic.
As you may not know, Adam is the monkey in Umbrella Academy. So he's really chimpanzee. Is it chimpanzee?
He's a chimpanzee.
Chimpanzee in Umbrella. And so I love Umbrella Academy. So it was great to see Adam. Yeah, I guess once you're in the HBO family, man, you're in the HBO family. So even though Netflix is connected there, but yeah, this is what I came out of this episode with is just this horrible feeling of how close it actually is. And as you said, Shannon, it mirrors 2016, 2020, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, right? We're just a year away from out. I mean, like, we're in May, dude. We're a year away from it all ramping up again. It's already taking shape over the last few months. So this one had more of a reality to it than uncomfortable reality to it than I would have liked to have seen. See, it's nice to sit back and watch these characters go through it, but when it starts to bleed into your actual life beyond just lessons or symbolism, it really starts to affect you. And especially if you're politically connected or have a interest in politics or a love for this country or any country, really, it can affect you to see these kinds of things. And I think what was so fascinating about because Jessie Armstrong wrote this episode and ANDRIJ PAREKH directed it. What I came out of this episode is that it doesn't matter that these characters have humanity and are vulnerable and care about people or whatever. At their core, these are not good people, and they only care about whatever they want. And they have done the horrible thing of lying to themselves, aside from Roman, lying to themselves that they are good people underneath, or they're the anomaly, right? Kendall, the last we saw Kendall was in that coat room, ready to slice the throats of his brother and sister to be the man on top of the throne. And then throughout this whole episode, he has a spine made of brittle wood throughout the whole episode, struggling between, am I a good dad or good person, or am I not? And how do I stop the Matsson deal? So this you see. And then with Shiv, Shiv's always painted herself as this blue person amongst the red people, yet she wouldn't sacrifice $1 to lose her status. She just wants that little bit of moral superiority, and she's willing to fuck over her brothers in the process. And even at the end, on the phone with Matsson, saying, we're going to burn it to the ground. So clearly, these last two episodes, Shannon, are going to be, World War III amongst the Roys for sure, because we don't even know if this election is going to officially be called fully without legal repercussions. And we'll see if we're going to get some court battles to add some more drama to this damn show for sure. So interesting stuff. So let's go character over character as we review this thing. Let's jump into with Tom Wambsgans. As you mentioned, Tom getting the pregnancy news delivered to him, one of the most inopportune moments, and it feels like Shiv is trying to bring him into her side because she wants her guy to win, Jimenez, so that she can allow the Matsson deal to go through. We see Tom is stressing about the pressures. As I said, Kendall is calling him, saying, we need the numbers, man. We need the numbers. Be my man. Tom tells Pam to drum up some bullshit about what's going on with these elections, the ballots and all that. And he talks to Darwin. That's who Adam is playing there. Darwin, about how to handle this. We find out that Greg went out with Matsson the night before, and he said it was unseemly, and he drank things that aren't normally drinks. Greg tells him, and he tells Tom about the business alliance between Shiv and Matsson, and Tom lies that he knows nothing about it. We're hearing that the exit polls say Jimenez. Greg talks to Tom about his future, and he wants his coffee, and he busts Greg down to Gregging for him, and then he wants Coke, and Greg gives him the Coke. Tom initially resists, then takes it. Then he browbeats Greg into taking some Coke himself. Jesus Christ! Then Connor calls to complain that he's not, that ATN is falling behind on calling some of this stuff. So Tom is freaking out about all of this. Then the teleprompter goes out, and then there's issues. And then he gets caught in the power struggle between the kids about how to call the election. Should I call Wisconsin? Should I not call Wisconsin? Because 100,000 ballots in a normally liberal area of Wisconsin have been caught in a big fire. And there's rumors that it's an electrical fire. There's rumors that maybe it was Mencken's people. It's a lot of drama that he gets but he is flipping out. And then, as I said, Tom and Shiv have their back and forth. And then eventually Tom agrees with Roman, agrees with Kendall, and makes the call for Mencken through ATN. And the Pierce News Network immediately puts Tom's face on a chyron saying ATN chief calls race for Mencken. So a lot of drama Tom had to deal with in this episode. Talk to me about your feelings on what Tom was going through here.
Well, another terrific performance by Matthew McFadyen.
Yes.
From moment one. The fact that he's not wearing the right shoes, how Sid used to wear sort of a slip-on sneaker, and Tom feeling very insecure that one of his subordinates is just like, really, you want to do that? He's like, yeah, they've got good arches. I'm fine. I'm very comfortable. Really, really funny. And also, I mean, Tom knows, like, I'm on the chopping block. Like, everybody wants a piece of me right now. Right. So the only recourse I have is to deliver these numbers, to do a really, really great job. You know, that moment where Greg does reveal that he went out with Matsson and Oscar the night before, and even though he was treated abominably, he's kind of been accidentally let into that inner circle a little bit.
He bashed Ebba in the last episode. It kind of won him pass into the club. Yeah.
He was in the right place at the right time. It's not that dissimilar from the way Greg was introduced into our whole, Succession family in season 1. He sat there and take the lumps, and now he's maybe not deliberately, but he has acquired some information that is really, really damaging to Tom's wife, that based off their last conversation, it seems like Tom might be okay serving, sacrificing Shiv. But just really, really terrific work. Watching how the touch screens are going down, people jumping on Tom right away as more and more of the Roy children start going onto the floor, which is they are apparently VIPs are persona non grata on the VIP floor, watching Tom juggle, watching Tom want to be the guy. As Roman is saying, like, we're calling it for Wisconsin. It's like, no, you don't call it. I call it. And then by the end, when they say we're calling it, and Shiv is telling Tom no, he's just like, your all's decision. And the fact that Shiv calls him Pontius Pilate. Now, for all of our audience that did not grow up going to a Christian Sunday school, Pontius Pilate was the Roman governor. He was the governor in Jerusalem, who basically left, according to the Bible, left Jesus of Nazareth's fate up to the rest of the Jewish populace. Saying that, like, knowing that this guy had done nothing wrong, he was still like, hey, I wash my hands of it. This is, this is on you. So terrific arc. Really great comedic moments between Tom and Greg as they are surreptitiously snorting cocaine behind a dry erase board, and where Greg tries to pretend. Were you pretending, Greg? I mean, the way Matthew McFadyen says Greg, like, it's always it's just so funny. The double take that both of them do after they've both done a line, and they kind of peer around the board, and then we get the wasabi moment where somehow the Darwin, Adam Godley's character, somehow he gets wasabi in his eye. Now, that's not Greg's fault. Like, if he happened to have touched something and gotten the wasabi in his eye, but then
he's a messy eater. He's a messy eater, though. Clearly.
Greg pouring lemon LaCroix, however you choose to pronounce it, pouring that water into the guy's eye, which, as we know, if you're a sparkling water imbiber, there isn't actual fruit in LaCroix. It is just, as Greg said, it's just a hint. It's just a hint. There's not that much lemon in it. Just a fantastic episode, and a really great behind the scenes or behind closed doors conversation between Tom and Shiv, which we already discussed, how Shiv in a position in a less powerful position. Like, did she tell Tom that she was pregnant? Did she wait until that moment to use it as ammunition, to use it as information to hoard, like Tom told Greg you do with information? Like you like, it's like a fine wine. You hold on to it, you hoard it, and then you smash someone in the face with it. Did she do that because she honestly wants them to know, or is she trying to find an ally because this unholy alliance with Lucas Matsson is starting to get out? So again, just really terrific work by Matthew Macfadyen, by Nicholas Braun. Just really, really great stuff.
Yeah, I enjoyed the way they took Tom through this journey in this episode, from the kingmaker to the court jester by the end, not wanting you to make the call, and then trying to, as Shiv said, become Pontius Pilate. But then in the end, it's his face that's on the screen, not Roman's or Kendall's. So it's his ass on the line. And at the beginning of the episode, he wanted to be like the respected guy, and he wanted to be the point person for all of this. He uses Greg to try to steer Roman and Kendall and Shiv off the floor, which of course does not work or barely works in certain moments. And he even lets his guy, thanks to Roman's influence, get on there and start to spew these ridiculous talking points about the fire to try to push the narrative that, you know, they're the victims in this situation, not the people who lost their ballots. So it's just, or got their ballots burnt up in the fire. So Tom loses all control in this whole situation because stronger forces than him are willing to make decisions. I mean, everybody seems to have no spine throughout this whole episode except for Roman. Roman is the only one. And Roman may be driven by the fact that he lost his #1 status to Kendall by not going with Kendall on the Living Plus presentation. So he is desperate to retain his status, and having the ear of the president, or the president in waiting possibly, in Mencken, is, by the way, Justin Kirk, fantastic as Mencken. I'm so good. A guy that I liked on Weeds, didn't love on Weeds, liked, but to see how he's grown as an actor, grown into his age, there's such a strong presence to him. He is so good. So that scene with him and Roman there talking about the connection that they have. Roman saying he's not an Uber Eats to be driving all around town, standing his ground. You know how last episode Nate and Kendall had that conversation, and he said, I'm not Gil, you're not your dad, and that's a good thing. Roman and Mencken are very much on the same field together, equals. And that is more the Gil Logan Roy situation than it is Nate and Kendall. So you saw that going through. What did you think about how Roman navigated all of this, going at Shiv, constantly saying false flag as a default to everything, pushing this thing, humoring Connor wanting the ambassadorship now and wanting to concede, and then going back and forth with his brother, and then berating his brother about the chicken versus steak conversation. And then in the end, he's the one, while Darwin is stuck with a carbonated eyes, he's the one that sees the opportunity to push forward this idea of calling it for Wisconsin. And in the end, Mencken becoming the winner in their minds there. So what do you think about how Roman navigated this whole thing and the storyline that went with him in this episode?
This is the coarse behavior of Roman from season 1.
Yes,
but this is a smarter Roman. Like, this is someone who has now been around a little bit, is taking cues from his dad, has a, kill everyone else attitude. I mean, the thing that I feel like Kieran Culkin and Justin Kirk have in common, especially with these roles specifically, there is a slipperiness to them.
Yes.
And now that is an adjective that it's just like, do they look wet? No. Yeah. Maybe their hair. But there's an ability to get by.
Yeah.
There's an ability to get in and out of situations that are the most beneficial. Yeah. And you see how Roman actually is quite intelligent. I mean, again, he's an asshole and he's throwing out one-liners and jokes, but he is really, really smart. When Connor calls him and says, hey, I didn't get Kentucky, but hey, what about that ambassadorship? Yeah. And he says, like, no, like that was a yesterday deal. Yeah, then when Connor throws out the idea, like, let me concede in his direction. Roman sees that as an opportunity. Like, okay, so his small devoted group of people, we've not, if he concedes that way, even though that means nothing,
Right.
it's like, okay, if we can assemble this little bit of a coalition, there will be less blowback when we make these bold and potentially incorrect calls with Wisconsin, and then ultimately with the election. Kieran Culkin, again, just fantastic work. It's so difficult to see, to think when it comes to statue time, like who I mean,
they moved him into the lead acting category just a few weeks ago, Shannon. So
who do you vote for? Do you vote for Jeremy Strong? Do you vote for Kieran Culkin? It's really, really hard. Like the moment, like that terrific scene on the mountain, I was like, that is okay. It is Kieran Culkin. Then you get to Living Plus, and it's like, nope, that is Jeremy Strong. Then you get to like, it is just an incredible tennis match these two are playing in terms of who's going to win Best Actor. But yeah, just such terrific work. And yet, like, he's such a bastard, because at the end of the day, he does not care about anyone else except his family, but really himself.
Right.
He doesn't. It does not matter who the president is. What matters is, like, do we have a guy that can help us out? This guy is saying he will block that deal. That's our guy. Like, fascinating work by the two of them.
Yeah, and I think Jessie did a wonderful job of writing this episode, because this shatters any of these idealistic notions about how this happens. Really, I mean, this episode is a harsh truth about how this actually goes down, or can go down. And I saw some people commenting online already on social media. Is this a show that will give people ideas? People are worried about some of these things. But look, you've got to shine a mirror to society sometimes, and people may not want to see what society actually is. And this episode really conveys about what has been going on over the last few election cycles in a, obviously in a fantastical point of view, but to make a point about how close these things are, how chilling some people's behavior is, how the rich really do determine, or the powerful, rich and powerful, really can determine the course of an election. Even the bumbling fools like Greg, because what if Darwin is on the floor, doesn't have the carbonated ice, doesn't have the wasabi? What if he does get on the floor and say, well, Mencken's victory is pending. We're not sure what's the deal is there. We're going to figure it out, but we're calling it for now. That would have been a less of a mandate for Mencken to use later in the speech. But because of what happens with the wasabi and Greg being a bumbling fool, that's what allows Roman to take advantage of that moment and drive the point home, push Tom to make the call, push Kendall to make the call. And he is the only one. And that's what's fascinating about the performance here from Kieran Culkin. And I wonder if they moved him up there and to be lead actor, because there is more to come from him. And he may essentially be the one at the top of the mountain when it's all said and done. He's the one that sacrifices Kendall. He's the one that sacrifices Shiv. And he sits up there in charge of the company and actually screws over Matsson as well, and buys Gojo and guts it like Kendall wanted to do, because Kendall doesn't have the spine for this, man. He doesn't have the spine for this. Roman does. Roman's ugly nature, Roman being in a cage, Roman growing up, Roman making those commentaries. There was even a moment where he said something about the blacks and the Jews in one moment. You're like, Jesus Christ. So there is a real ugliness inside of Roman that is never going to be fixed. And even in those moments where I started to come around on him earlier in the season and was really like excited that he wanted the family to stick together, that has now gone by the wayside, and his lustful ambition to be the number one guy, which was comical in season one, has really come to bear now, Shannon, in this episode. I think it's very clear that he wants to be the top dog now when it's all said and done, right?
Well, I mean, you really find out, you kind of find out who a person is when they're cornered.
Yeah.
And Kendall, taking the lead in that Living Plus presentation, sending Roman that doctored video of Logan saying, Roman Roy has a micro dick and always gets it wrong, which you can be construed like, oh, I was kidding. That was a joke. But when you see someone on their heels, on their back foot, he's coming out swinging, because it's like, okay, this is what I have to do now to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break here right now. We're going to get into Shiv and Kendall and all the other shenanigans right after this. There we go. All right, there we go. That's what's just throwing that in there, Shannon. All right, anyway, let's move on to Shiv here.
Very good.
Thank you. Shiv and Roman are going back and forth about Mencken and Jimenez throughout the whole episode. And, I've seen people wanting to defend Shiv as the good one in the room. She isn't. None of them are. They're all equally terrible. And certainly this episode conveys that. You may want Jimenez to win because of what Jimenez's ideas are, but don't think that Shiv isn't also giving herself to another ultra billionaire with a terrible moral compass, just like her brothers. So there is no difference in the choices. Okay, they're both terrible terrible billionaires who have no moral compass at all, considering what Matsson is doing with Ebba and other things that he's done in the past that we find out about. I'm sure him and Oscar have cut people up and cooked them for dinner. But anyway, this whole situation here she has. And so she is trying to play both sides in this whole thing, being on the phone with Matsson, updating him, going to Tom and trying to apologizing for what happened on the balcony. But then when Tom doesn't respond in the right way, she calls him out rather than because a healthy person creates space for you to react however you're going to react to information, whether you accept their apology or not. They just want to be able to say what they got to say to you and let it be. But if you're going to be offended by someone's face and how they're reacting and what does sure mean and all of that, and then drop the bomb of the baby, it doesn't look like it was the right time to be doing that. And Tom had a right to question her. But I tell you what, I paused that moment, Shannon, when that happened to him. I was like, wow, this is how far their relationship is deteriorated, where Tom isn't even happy that she's pregnant with his child. He thinks it's a tactic. And even she takes a moment to really grasp how far they have fallen apart as a couple and walks out. She wants to wait. She tells Matsson to wait to put the numbers up about the India stuff there till after the election, thinking that Jimenez is going to win because all the exit polls say Jimenez is going to win. Now he says, because I was talking to Greg and Oscar, of all people, I am not going to release the numbers. I'm going to let it dance around or whatever, which really puts her in a comfortable position. And then Nate calls Shiv and talks about some of the issues at the voting places, wants to get her involved. And so she is kind of following right behind Roman to try to stop Roman from doing things that he's doing. Then there are claims and counterclaims about the fire in Milwaukee and all of this stuff. And then Kendall comes in, who is in his lowest point, as you said, Shannon, his lowest point, and says, I want to know, I feel like I'm a bad father. And Shiv encourages him in this moment of what we think is brotherhood and sisterhood coming together here, family coming together. She says, no, you are a good person. You're a good father. You did the best that you could considering the situation. You're actually a good person. And we buy it for a few seconds, for a couple of minutes. And then Kendall asks her to call Nate, and she fakes the call to Nate, calling an unregistered or unconnected number. And then Kendall calls Nate later to reaffirm with Shiv, because Shiv wasn't committed because obviously she didn't make the call. And he finds out what actually happened. And then the back and forth where she tries to be like, I all this stuff to defend herself. She is caught red-handed and so diminished in this whole back and forth with them that by the end, when they call it for Mencken, which she feels the weight of, and every woman in that show felt the weight of Mencken winning, which was very similar to what happened in 2016 when Trump won. You saw that happen. You saw that. Even people in the newsroom felt the vibe of that, and Shiv was taking that in. And then later we see her on the phone with Matsson saying, we're going to burn them to the fucking ground as she walks off. So you tell me, how did you feel about how Shiv's storyline went in this episode? And of course, Sarah Snook's performance.
Sarah Snook, as always, the entire cast, but Sarah Snook, she plays Cat getting caught eating the canary incredibly well. I mean, she's so good. Watching her back and forth, it's almost like Kendall is the person, Roman's the devil, Shiv is the angel.
Good call.
In this scenario, in this particular scenario, there are no angels in the Roy family.
No.
But you see Shiv just kind of like, guys, I get it. We can't elect him. Like that's scary. That's too scary.
Right.
And also it's difficult to tell like how much of this is she being authentic,
Yeah.
and how much of it is if Mencken gets in, he's going to kill the deal, which will, torpedo the thing that I have going on with Matsson. It's so difficult to know where her allegiance actually lies. I think like all Roy kids, her allegiance lies with herself.
Right. Right.
And it just so happens that the candidate who would be better lines up with her personal interests.
Right.
So yeah, that's why all of these characters, but Siobhan especially, is such a fascinating character to watch how they operate. When she takes Tom into the closet and says, or not the closet, the boardroom.
Oh, that's
and
right. Yeah.
like gives him like, hey, I want to apologize. At that point, for me, she's real. She's being real there.
Yeah. Yeah. Possibly. Yeah. Yeah.
She knows the argument that they had. She knows that she's gonna have a kid, Tom's kid. Yeah. He still doesn't know. So it's like, let's try to salvage this. Pretty bad timing, but let's try to salvage this. And it's when he throws out the revelation that he now knows about Matsson.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, okay. And then the disbelief on her face when she tells him that she's pregnant, and he's just like, is this real? And from Tom's point of view, you understand why he thinks that.
Sure, of course.
And her shock and dismay at that response makes sense as well, because okay, we have seen each other as bad as we can get. You know me more than anyone.
Yeah.
Here's this piece of information that you don't know, thinking that maybe this will tip the scales, and it doesn't. It actually has the opposite effect. And watching the moment that she pulls Greg in and did not use the wrong approach versus saying, look,
you know what? You're trying to be so nice to these people, man. This is such a selfish move. She says, how about I offer for you to keep your internal organs on your inside rather than I pull them out of your asshole? Well, it's not the wrong approach, Shannon.
I mean, if you want to break it down, it was the wrong approach. I'm not being as colorful in my feelings, perhaps, but that was not the thing to say. Like maybe at that point there would have been a way, like, Greg, this is happening. Like, I'm going to be able to help you, but she didn't do that. She chose to try to belittle him. Right. And the thing with Greg is, you can belittle him as much as you like. He's a cockroach. I mean, he's going to survive a nuclear war.
Well, and he gave her the opportunity to help her by saying, what would be in it for me if I kept quiet about this? And that's when she responded so brutally. And in doing so, shut that door. We've got to give Greg something so he'll still somewhat be loyal if he sees he can get something out of it. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing that, I mean, I know we're talking about Shiv, but that's the thing with Greg is, like, he is bumbling. Like, there's no denying that, but he's also not stupid.
Yes. He's not stupid.
From season 1, he has known how to play things, granted, kind of clumsily, and he ends up being the butt of a lot of jokes, but he's still there. Yeah. He's still surviving. And the moment where Kendall pulls Greg aside after he's made that call to Nate, and we see that look on Jeremy Strong's face of, again, disbelief, like, you didn't make any call. Yeah. And then when he goes to Greg and says, do you know about this thing? And as Greg is walking away, and I think this is the most un-Greg moment we've gotten, as he locks eyes with Shiv and just kind of gives a, just for all of the podcast listeners, I just did a slight shrug, mirroring Nicholas Braun's performance. But when she's called on the carpet and you see her trying to spin, and it is not working, and then she tries to appeal to Kendall's better nature, saying, like, yep, this is what I was trying to do. We cannot we cannot give this to Mencken. And Kendall's personal animus there in that situation is what made Mencken, or what made them call the presidency for Mencken.
Yeah. And the thing about her that is so incredibly fascinating, because I all the kids deserve ridicule and consternation for sure, but like there is an instinct to do the right thing. There is an instinct. She understands instinctually as a woman what it means for Mencken to become president. And certainly Mencken's speech did nothing to alleviate any fears that anybody has about all this. He talks about being pure and clean and not having the politics of compromise and all of this. And it's clear where he wants to go and how he wants to put this in motion. I mean, as we're recording this right now, you see what's going on in Florida. There's a new report about some new laws there where they don't want to teach anything that has anything to do with diversity or inclusion or any of that stuff. And it is chilling how one person, when they get in charge and has a clear vision and has the backing of a legislature, can ram through all kinds of laws and points of views and bills that will affect people's daily lives because they think this is the way it should be, rather than figuring out a balance. It's much more, this is my point of view. And Mencken is certainly that person when you're watching his speech. So she wasn't wrong to feel this way. The problem is that she's the wrong messenger because, as you said, Shannon, all these other things are involved. Her deal with Matsson, her issues with Tom, her stuff with Greg, the way she treats Greg. And then, of course, betraying her brothers, not telling them straight up, I don't want to go along with this. I'm going with Matsson. You guys do your thing. Rather than being straight up with him, she has been working behind the scenes. And look, all of them have been backstabbers, for God's sakes. We didn't even mention Tom calls her out and says, you're the one that killed your dad, not me. You try to blame me for it. And last week, last episode, you're the one that killed your dad because of the things that you did. And it's like, whoa, Jesus. All the gloves are off in this back and forth and in all the stuff with Shiv for sure. But, Shiv's a warrior as well, bro. So the stuff with her and Matsson, it's just that Matsson's not a reliable guy to go to battle with because he could end up screwing her or stabbing her in the back as well. So it's an interesting position that Shiv is in now. And how much does having the baby change? How much does being pregnant affect her point of view of how much she wants to fight for a future that she believes in, that she wants to see, and that takes care of her and her child? I don't know. It's going to be crazy to see for sure. Let's move on to Kendall here. We see this is the Kendall that I hate. And this is the Kendall that always comes up when shit gets tough and requires him to make strong decisions. Kendall always fumbles the ball. Kendall's balls always turn to liquid. His fucking spine becomes a popsicle stick, and he always gives in, man. And you could see that Kendall was the one that was working, Roman was the one that was working Kendall the whole episode, and Kendall was going to turn, but Kendall didn't want to blame himself for it. He didn't want to take the blame. He didn't want to call it for Mencken and have that on his shoulders. When Shiv betrays him, or he finds out about Shiv's betrayal, that's the excuse. See, Kendall loves to blame other people for the situation he's in, and so in that moment, when he finds out she betrayed him, he's able to say, well, we're going to call it for Mencken because you made me do this. I didn't want to do this. You made me do this. Even after telling me I was a good person and all of that, when in fact, if he was less petty, he'd have navigated this a little bit better and could have made a better decision. But this is what happens. But throughout the whole episode, talking to Raba about their kid and finding out that he's the one that's been sending the cars to follow them for extra security without even telling Raba, and then the back and forth with Roman throughout the whole episode. Well, I don't know. Is that the right move? Oh, and when is it Kennedy when he speaks? I think it's Adam Kennedy when he gets up there and delivers that tirade about how is the fire leftist and all this kind of stuff. It is Kendall's like, oh, I don't think that was the way to go. There's no strength from Kendall throughout the whole episode, bro. And Jeremy Strong does a wonderful job of playing a guy who is doing this the whole time until eventually he thinks he's making a power move when in fact it's born out of a place of pettiness and spite. So what do you think about how they handled Kendall throughout this whole episode?
I mean, I think you put it pretty perfectly.
Yep.
When he's the guy in the power seat, he waffles. Like
Yes.
his decision making it is not consistent, it is not clear, it's
Yeah.
not fluid. You know, you see both of his siblings are pulling on him.
Yeah.
And the reason that he does go with Mencken is because of what Shiv did.
Right.
It's
Right.
it's not because he thinks it's the right decision. He thinks because like, oh, you did that to me. No, I'm gonna do this to you.
Right.
And he's justifying in his head, like, we can work with this guy. We can
Yeah.
work with this guy. But then you see him in the car as he's driving home and talking with Rava that he thinks he made a mistake.
Yes.
Saying that can I come over? Can I come over? Can I just talk to
Yeah.
talk to the kids? Knowing that he has empowered someone who thinks less of people like his own child.
Like his own child. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And you know, you get that moment. It's a moment, but you get that moment of humanity when Kendall says to Roman, one of those Mencken guys did this to my kid.
Right.
And you see
that does affect Roman for a second. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, she's okay. But in Roman's eyes, like, we are so above everything. Like, it's shitty that happened. She's going to be okay. Like, we are above all of this. Like, we're controlling all of this.
Yeah.
The moment where Kendall really kind of blows up at Tom when Tom says, boy, Shiv, you seem a little unhinged. The moment where Kendall raises his voice telling him to watch it. Oh my gosh. I love moments like that.
Yeah.
They're also the type of moment on a set with a performer like Jeremy Strong I would not want to be there for. Because it's been written a lot that Jeremy Strong's process is not the most conducive to working with other performers.
He's a super intense guy.
Yeah, super intense. Doesn't like to rehearse. You know, he wants those real reactions. But you know, and I'm sure you've been in situations like this too, on sets, in acting classes, when you have people that are unpredictable.
Yes.
You might be able to get some incredible moments, but at the same time, at what cost?
Yeah.
You know, we were in, this is before you got to Florida State, but it was an acting class that Vogel and I were in together. It was acting one at Florida State University. And we got paired up with someone that we didn't know. Like the whole exercise, it was like a semester long exercise where we're getting to know someone. And then we do one of those open scenes where it's just nonsensical dialogue. And this guy that I had been paired with, I didn't know him. We meet once a week. We're very different personality wise. And as we're talking about things that we admire about the other person, he said, I respect your freedom. And our acting teacher went, what does that mean? And the dude fucking shoved me like to dual hand, like, bah! What? And oh yeah. And I don't know where that came from, but our acting teacher immediately got up, was like, hey, are we okay? And I'm like, yeah. Wasn't expecting that. But that's the type of thing. And that's not to say that, Jeremy Strong would lay hands on anyone.
No, of course not.
But it's the type of thing from that type of performer that, again, creates some incredible moments on stage, some incredible moments on screen. I personally just would not want to be there for it.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, but you do see, as you said, you see him struggling with the moments of humanity within him. Because I think Shiv is right that we've seen all three of them be good people. That's the problem with the show. Not the problem with the show, but that's the problem with these characters, that they have the tendency to be good. It's just that if you threaten their money, you threaten their status, you threaten all three of them could have been real happy, having nothing to do with trying to run this empire. Really, if their father hadn't died, I think they'd have been happy, maybe trying to make that Pierce New situation work for them. But in the end, now the desire for them, all three of them, to go after this thing, which by the way, ironically, Roman did not want to do. Remember, Roman was like, no, I don't think we should do this. It's not what we should do. Let's focus on this. And it was Kendall and Shiv, in their desire to fuck over their father and take something from him and be the one sitting on top of the throne, that ends up leading to all of this happening. And it may end up leading to the one reluctant person who didn't want to do this, of all the siblings, being the one sitting on top of the throne, or in the throne rather, when it's all over. I don't know, but Kendall throughout this episode, Jeremy Strong did a wonderful job portraying a guy who is clearly conflicted, but also knows that he has to sacrifice his child. And even probably having because as deep of an incredible actor and that Jeremy Strong is, I'm sure there was a level here of like, I'm repeating the same mistakes as my dad. I'm becoming my father. I'm understanding him in ways that I never wanted to understand him, which destroys the narrative that I had created in my mind about how the way he treated me. Here I am disregarding my own child just to put a deal through, just so we can make a lot of money, just so I can create this false sense of security for her in the world. You know, he fools himself that he's doing what he's doing for his child when he's actually doing what he's doing for his own ego to be the top dog at the company. And before anyone says, no, he cares about he was ready to sacrifice his brother and sister in the final scene of the last episode so he could be the guy on top. And so that tells you this is the drive that all of them have. And Jeremy did a wonderful job throughout. Let's hit a couple moments before we leave. Let's talk about Connor, brother, man. Connor comes in. I mean, we have this back and forth with him and Willa about the election, and Connor's like, I'm really happy I didn't drop out, and Willa's like, yeah, you got to be in it to win it. But in the end, and Mark Lynn Baker tells him, hey man, maybe Kentucky's in play, and then he's getting absolutely walloped within seconds of those interactions in multiple states, and he becomes the sniveling little coward running over to Roman to beg him to have Mencken give him an ambassadorship, I think to Slovakia or something. And
Slovenia.
And even Willa kind of brings up the fact that she won't be a fan of Mencken, but then she gets caught up in all the places she'll get to have lunch or dinner in and wake up in these exotic locations or these international cities. So even her, as a woman, knowing that this guy is going to be bad for women overall, she defaults to what she can get out of it instead of fighting the good fight and forcing Connor not to concede. She goes along with it. And by the end, Connor delivers one of the most ridiculous speeches. Someone called it in one of the reviews, a YouTube comment thread come to life who doesn't comment a lot on YouTube and is 100% correct. And calling his people the con heads, I mean, just all of it is so beyond ridiculous. You know, cone heads is not that far away from con heads. So your thoughts here on what happened with Connor in this episode?
I mean, again, Willa being for as unconventional a way as their relationship started. Willa is being the dutiful partner here. Watching, I think it's not a coincidence that we got to see 3 different presidential kind of headquarters, war rooms, and how we saw Mencken, we saw Jimenez, and then we saw Connors, which Mark Lynn Baker, which I feel like he was in last week's, and we didn't mention it, but Mark Lynn Baker, as this erudite academic with his 19th century presidential beard with the chops that go into the stash, saying like, all right, if it's going to happen anywhere, my liege, it's going to be Kentucky. And the moment that Kentucky does go for Mencken, you see the defeat in Connor's face, thinking like, if I can get one, then this whole thing has been a success. And Willa's response, which again, dutiful partner response, so, you know what, fuck Kentucky, and him saying, no, we shall not do that. We shan't do that. Really taking a page out of Mark Lynn Baker's character's book. We shall not do that. But then watching him run to Roman and being like, hey, what if we did this thing? And even Willa's kind of like, I think I'm giving Willa more credit than you are, kind of like,
as you tend to do, which I appreciate. It speaks to the good nature that you have, brother. I'm more cynical than you are.
Saying like, he's really right wing, but I guess we'd get this. I guess we'd get that. Like trying to find the silver lining in this potential awful scenario. I love his concession speech where he's basically saying, well, Mencken's going to win. And then he calls out his almost running mate, who I shall not name.
The Jackrabbit.
watching him get those last few digs in while he's got a microphone in front of him. Yeah, I mean, it's Alan Ruck is he's a wonderful performer. He's so incredibly funny. And really watching him this season, I feel like this season he really got to do quite a bit, even though he's always going to be in second position to the main trio. But watching what he has done with what he's like, he's a really wonderful performer. And looking at the the preview for next week, which it mainly looks from the preview looks like it's going to be the Roman show, but knowing that we are seeing all of these characters in a emotionally vulnerable moment, it'll be interesting to see the performance that we get next week.
Yeah, his speech was very Nixon-esque. You know, when Nixon lost in California, I think it was, before he became president, he lost and quit politics. And then, of course, they brought him back and he became president, and all the shit that happened there in 72. But when he was in California, I think was final thing after he stopped being in politics, he's like, you guys won't have Tricky Dick, you won't have Nixon to kick around anymore. You know, it's that kind of thing where he was, and that's what seemed like Connor was doing, his kind of defiant stance of calling people out in petty ways rather than being more gracious. Even though he said we shan't do that about Kentucky, here he is becoming a petty guy on the speech. So it just speaks volumes about him. I want to wrap up the review by highlighting this moment that I've touched on earlier in the episode, Shannon. Get your thoughts on this. We have this moment between Greg and Jess at the elevator. And I bring this up from a personal place because you see the idea that Mencken is going to win wash over Jess's face. You see, who was it that, oh God, I can't remember the character's name that was with Tom. Pam as well, like slamming down the drink that she's drinking when they finally announced that Mencken's going to win, because you can tell. And then even Shiv, when Roman says, oh, nothing's going to happen, Shiv says to herself, oh, shit's going to happen, Roman, shit's going to happen. And so we see the women in the show, and then we see even people in the control booth, even in the newsroom, really grasp the fact that Mencken is going to win and what it means. And I think this is a point that Jessie is making with this episode. If you're a part of the machine, you have some blame here. And that's what he is trying to say. Like, you can't delude yourself anymore. If you're a PA, an assistant, and you work for certain organizations that try to push certain narratives, incorrect narratives, try to influence elections in negative ways, you can't delude yourself that you don't have a part of it. You're just doing a job. I'm just collecting a paycheck. No, you're a part of it. Your work yields consequences. And seeing Jess's reaction, and even Greg's like, but I'm just a small part of the machine. I'm just a cog. You know, him trying to devalue his contribution to the whole situation when he ironically could have been the reason this all happened. And seeing Jess just kind of absorb that and everyone else absorb that, I think Jessie is trying to make a point with this episode, trying to drive that point home to people to understand it isn't just a job. You're a part of that machine that yields that product. You must take some responsibility for it. So, what am I off base, or what do you think of that?
No. I think you're right on point. I mean, it's impossible to not compare the events of this episode with the events of 2016.
Yeah,
like that. You know, the comparisons. You know, they're right there.
Yeah,
2016 and 2020. I mean, even Mencken talks about like, hey, you're not broadcasting the fraud.
Yeah, right.
But, you know, on election night 2016, you remember where you were, because we were watching Hacksaw Ridge together.
Yes, we were there together. We were getting the notices. Yeah,
and neither one of us could believe. I like to think of us both as, you know, very exceptional moviegoers, and that we're not talkers. We're not checking our phones. You and I were checking our phones a lot during that movie because we couldn't believe what we were seeing. And there was a moment, I don't know if you remember this, but watching a lot of how the characters are grasping with the gravity of what a Mencken presidency means in this world. Coming out of that movie, like, I probably had a little bit more of a Kendall Roy attitude. Not that I very much voted the other way. But what's the worst that could happen? We've had presidents before who have not been able to do anything. Like, and I remember saying that to you, being like, how bad could it actually be? And you were very steadfast, and you're like, it's going to get bad. And you were right. And so Kendall's point of view that he, you know, it's going to be fine. We've had shitty presidents in the past. The republic has gone on, and Shiv having more the Rocha attitude of stuff's going to happen. And even Greg, I mean, Greg not knowing that this personal dig at Shiv, because Greg is not informed of everything. Greg enjoying that moment of getting one over on her, and then not realizing that personal victory translated into a loss for the country. Even him not wanting to take the blame, he's like, I guess I mean, I'm not the one making the call. I just have to tell him to press the button. You know what? I'm not even pressing the button. I'm telling them watching the reconciling that with himself. It was fascinating. And yeah, I mean, just as we talked about at the beginning, how with behind the scenes and Jessie Armstrong talking about the sort of once in a lifetime political events that we've witnessed just in the last 25 years with 2020, 2016, 2000, that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Right. And the rationalization that we say to ourselves when we're involved in these kinds of situations, it's very true. And it applies all over the place, which is why it makes it tough to exist in the world in a more idealistic approach to the world, because everything seems to be tarnished. If you go far enough up the scale or up the ladder, everything seems to be tarnished in one way or another, depending on your point of view. But I remember. Exactly. I absolutely remember that. And I've steadfast, and I knew it was going to happen. And it certainly did. And certainly speaking to a lot of women afterwards, a lot of our female friends, and the tears, the sobbing, that would legitimate sobbing. And especially with Jess, was a woman of color, even more so, her reaction to it really hammers the point home, because there are not a lot of people of color in this show. So seeing someone like her, who has been an essential part of the show throughout the entire 4 seasons, seeing her react to it, you kind of grasp what this really means. So we'll see. As you said, the next episode is the funeral. So it's certainly going to be interesting who shows up. Does Mencken show up? And if Mencken does, what's that situation? Does Jimenez show up because she's connected to Shiv, or he's connected to Shiv? Does Nate show? Like, what happens at this funeral? It's going to be real interesting to see. And how does Connor fuck it up? I can't wait to see on that. And Marcia, how does Marcia take them all to task? We'll be very, very curious to see. All right, but there you go. That's our spoiler review for for episode 8 of season 4, America Decides, here on the Outlaw Nation channel. We appreciate you all hanging out with us every week and letting us or enjoying us discuss and letting us entertain you with our discussion about these episodes. Because I mean, this is such a phenomenal show, and I always thank Shannon McClung for turning me onto it a few weeks ago and finally making me watch this thing. And damn, I've enjoyed every single episode this season. Shannon, another fun show. Where can people find you, and any final words on the episode?
Yeah, if you'd like to follow me on social media, on Twitter, it's at Shannon_McClung. On Instagram, it's Shannon the Geek Buddy. You can see me every week with Mr. Roga and the absent Mr. Michael Vogel on the Geek Buddies. And yeah, man, I mean, again, it took a lot. I think it took you asking me, if I binge this and we watch the 4th season, will you review it with me? And I said, absolutely. I'm so jealous of the fact that you got to indulge in 39 hours of the Roy family in such a compressed time frame, and really getting to witness like what an incredible series this has been. So yeah, I mean, it will be impossible to say what was the best episode of the season. This is definitely up there.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Maybe one of the best episodes of the series for sure. There you go. All right. Well, as for me, you can follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch. And please, as I said, remember to subscribe to the channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button so you see we're dropping all the content we do here on the Outlaw Nation channel, just like the Geek Buddies, as Shannon mentioned, coming up later on in the week. All right. Y'all take care of yourselves. Be well. We're heading to the funeral next week, and we'll talk to you next time with another brand new spoiler review here of Succession. Peace. Thank you.